Back at it again a day later. Come back and the pour 15 is nice and hard. You can tell this stuff has got some serious hardness to it overnight, man. It's just like concrete. But everything looks good, all hardened up. I noticed on my panel, it looks like I applied it a little heavy in here, so it kind of wrinkled up. But we went ahead and popped the bubble, and it'll harden up on its own. But yeah, the Pour 15, super durable. I'm gonna finish this up once I get it installed. I'm gonna use a 3M product. It's like a wax non-corrosion agent, and we're gonna go ahead and fill that once we get it on the car. So now we can go and I will show you what we're going to do with this piece. Remember, I was telling you about this piece, how you want to keep this whole section right here from the body line up intact. Now what we're going to use that for, remember our hole I told you to save for a reference point, and also we got this hole right here that we're going to save for a reference point. And we have this here that we're going to use as a reference point. With those 3 points lined up on our new piece, we should be able to cut this thing damn near perfect. So we got our reference panel cut off the old piece that came off the existing quarter panel. This was meant to help us align where our cut point was. As you remember, our severance point was up here, so I cut off a chunk of this off the old panel. And now we are just lining up the holes. See there? Sure you get that perfectly lined up over there. And here, so this quarter panel came off of a post 86 car. So it didn't have, you know, the quarter louvers that they did for the SVO in 84. So obviously we're going to have to drill that hole because that's our hole to our side spat. But what you want to do is, you know, line up that hole, line up your edge here. As you can see, the notch is missing out of the new piece, but that's okay. Just make sure everything's aligned before you make your severance cut. You want to be sure to do this once, so the mark that we marked from 2 3/4 now is not in place since there is no notches. So unfortunately you won't have that as a reference, but you will have this hole, and just do some other measurements just to be sure you know where you're at. And this looks like it's lining up right at this notch right here. So that is the factory spot for the hole. We'll just have to make that hole. So we're going to go ahead and make that cut. So what I did to mark the severance cut, went ahead and clamped both sides on the corners here with the vice grips. And if you remember our scribing tool we had earlier, come back in here and scribe this line really well so you can see it with the cutoff wheel. And what I like to do is go about 2-3 mils up into the panel, so you're getting a little bit more, and that's compensation for, you know, material that you cut off with a cutoff wheel, and or room for error. If you have to grind some off, you definitely want to leave 2 to 3 mils extra. Alright, so we got our severance cut. And now what we're going to do, we're not going to get rid of this chunk right here. This chunk is pretty important. This is actually going to be our sleeve material. BMW and most manufacturers require you to have a sleeve in a unibody quarter panel. So we're going to go ahead and use this piece as a sleeve. Just so happens that 40 millimeters is about the width of, you know, 1.5 inch tape. So we're going to go ahead and run that guy all the way down, mark our cut, and that's how we make a sleeve. The sleeve is actually going to tuck behind both panels. It's going to. Alright, so the sleeve's cut. Shot a little weld through primer on it up in there. So now we're just test fitting the sleeve. Hard to do with one hand, but yeah, we're just test fitting the sleeve up in there. It's an exact copy, so it should fit great. The more and more we slide it up. I'm going to go ahead. I feel a little bit of resistance right in here, so it's probably the dum-dum that was holding the window in, or the spat on my case. So I'm going to go ahead and get to the back side. Yeah, there is like a ball there. So you want to make sure your back side is clean so this sleeve can fit flush up in there really nice. You should have, no gap by the time you're done. We got the sleeve fitting nice and tight now. I like to have about a ½ inch overhang. I'll go up into the existing panel a little bit further. That's just what I like to do. Seems like it gives more support. But I went in here with my belt sander and I put these little notches. Now these are for the weld. Okay, so we got the sleeve fitting nice and tight now. Don't make fun of the clamps. All my vice grips are at work. But yeah, it's fitting super tight. That's what you want. You want it to fit tight. If you don't have it fitting tight, you'll be filling gaps and have serious warpage. So this is the time you need to take your time and do right. But as you can see, these little notches here, now those notches are for me to tack the sleeve to the panel so it stays put. It doesn't distort as we're welding the other panel to it. And like I said before, I have this weld through primered and then we tucked it up in there. So it's got some corrosion resistance. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and tack this in place. Alright, so now we're just dry fitting up the panel, making sure this seam's going to fit nice and tight. You want about a 1/8 inch gap in here in your seam to where you can see your sleeve. So it looks all good. It looks a little tight up here. So I'm going to have to take some more material off this corner here, it looks like. But do this several times until you got the panel fitting good. And remember the scribe marks that we scribed all these edges? Now you're going to go back in here and find out where those scribe marks are and try to put that panel exactly where it came from. That way the hatch and everything lines up. Your taillights, your bumper. Very crucial that you make sure it matches up to your scribe marks. This is the second sleeve on the front side of the door jamb. As you can see, it fits up in there good. Again, the notches, you want to make sure you put the notches, room for your tack weld. And definitely cut this side and then this side off of your sleeve, just because the panel is going to be sitting on top of there and you don't want it to be doubled up. So we're going to go ahead and tack that sleeve as well. We'll have both sleeves tacked up. So we're just test fitting up the panel. It's not going smoothly, I'll admit. So this flange that tucks into this rocker, I had to bend it. So I got it fitting pretty flush, alright? So this panel's been around the block a time or two. And it's really showing, at the top where you're trying to push this panel in. And this flange here is definitely bent. So we're going to have to try to bend that around. As to be expected with a 30-year-old panel, So just take your time, line it up good. And it appears the 86 quarter panel would have been cut off right there. So this is a new tab that Ford added. So we're going to have to, cut that off. But don't get discouraged. It's just part of the deal. You have to test fit it and pull it off, cut, grind. Just take your time and it'll turn out really good. It'll be worth it. Alright, so we're still fitting the panel. As you can see, I got that flange all straightened out. Looks great. And now we're at the fitting part where you definitely want to take some time. Line up your doors, make sure everything's fitting great. As you can see, it's big right here, okay? So that's perfectly fine. The panel's loose. Don't get scared, whatever. But we're going to go back here. And guys, when you're test fitting these and you don't have, 3 of your buddies over here, just use your brain. Line up these marks really nice in here. And you can see you got a hole there. So what I want you to do is just go to the hardware cabinet, grab a flat washer, a bolt, nut, and nut this thing up. So as you can see on this door gap, it's huge, right? So it needs, the whole thing needs to push forward and tighten up that gap. So the easiest way to do that is to push from the back and get this panel pushed forward. That'll give you that 1/8 inch you need up front. Alright, so we got our nice consistent door gaps. After many test fits and trial and error, see what kind of works and what doesn't, we got this quarter lined up pretty good. I know that looks huge, but once those panels are the same color, it's going to look exactly like the other side. What I did was, the panel itself needed to go in, so I pushed the panel in, and then I ran these little screws just inside that lip. I put 2 just to hold it in place. So now this is the last test fit, so when I go to put it on next time, those holes will be there and kind of guide me in the same spot. And if you are welding, you'll just weld that guy back up. So it's not a huge issue. But yeah, this sleeve's kind of ugly, but most of it's covered up by the window. I'm not gonna lie. So it's not gonna be a bad deal. And of course we cut the tab off that wasn't needed for this panel. And as you can see here, this sleeve is fitting nice and tight. We got that 1/8 inch gap that I was telling you about. I went ahead and drilled a hole for my side spat because I'm going to need that hole anyway, and it's also helping hold the panels together. I just used a washer. But like I was telling you guys, just get wise, and you ain't got a bunch of people helping you line this panel up, so use bolts, screws, whatever you need to get this fitting good. But I would say this is the last dry fit of the panel. That's what we're going to do now. Feel the back of the panel and see where we need to put our spot welds. So since this is the last dry fit, I'll go ahead and mark these where we got some good metal, and those will be our plug weld points. You kind of want to feel the back side, make sure you got some good metal there. Same goes around the front. Spread them out like factory does. Don't put them real close to each other. And you don't need a ton, because we're going to be mixing this with glue too. So it's going to be glued and welded. It's the method that I prefer. So yeah, last dry fit complete, and I think we're ready to start slapping on a panel after we drill these holes.